Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Miasin. Today I'm actually going to be talking about a new spell card for the TCG, which is Triple Tactical Talents. Now, it actually changed the name. Before it was actually 3 Tactical Talents, so I'm actually going to be calling it 3 Tactical Talents because I'm used to it for the remainder of the video. So before we start, friendly reminder to like and subscribe, especially if you guys are interested in more videos like these, because it's just my second time making a card review video, so if you guys are actually down, definitely let me know. 3 Tactical Talents is a normal spell card that reads, if your opponent previously used a monster effect this turn, apply one of 3 effects. So now you actually have the choice between 3 kind of like forbidden cards in a way. I mean, 2 really banned cards and 1 card that never really existed in a way. So there is Pot of Greed, you know, because you draw 2 cards, Forceful Sentry, because you look at your opponent's hand, take 1 card and shuffle it back into the deck, and then the third one is kind of like Change of Heart, but not really, because Change of Heart actually targets, but this one doesn't. So it's definitely a buff, and the reason why it's completely different is because the word target is actually a huge keyword in Yu-Gi-Oh! And being able to steal like monsters that can't be targeted, like Dragoon, actually can be completely game-changing. So not only is it like a card that will pretty much always bait a negate, but if you already baited negates with other cards and then you use this right after, then it's going to have like a really significant impact in the game, like I said. So in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about all the pros and the cons of this card, and also my personal opinion about this card. Like, is it really going to be seeing like as much play as we think it will? Alright, so in the OCG, this card actually started with seeing like a lot of success because people were playing this alongside Called by the Grave and Crossout Designator in order to like really stop hand traps as best as they possibly could, because everyone knows how ridiculously hand trap dependent the OCG is. They play 3 Max C, which kind of just, you know, while you're playing Max C, you really want to counter Max C as well, so you're playing Ash in order to counter it, and then since you're already playing Max C in order to draw hand traps while your opponent is comboing off, then you might as well play like Infinite in order to play around Called by the Grave and more hand traps, because you really don't want to get FTK'd, or you really don't want people to make multiple negates. But then there will be like a really weird cancer dynamic where you only play hand traps, so your deck is just not really resilient enough, because you start losing to things that just don't really care about hand traps, like summoning Dragoon, for example. That doesn't really lose to Ash if you're using Anaconda, it loses to Valor and Infinite. But if you're going for Red Eyes Fusion, then it doesn't lose, you know, like, I mean, like straight up Red Eyes Fusion, then it doesn't lose to Valor and Infinite, but it loses to Ash. So you almost feel like you need like a billion hand traps sometimes just to stop something very basic. So people are trying to play like new, like, I mean, not really new, but very powerful spell cards that kind of allow you to not really care too much about that. So Forbidden Drop has been one really important card in the OCG metagame, but I'm going to be making a completely different video on Forbidden Drop, so you don't really have to worry. So in the OCG, I feel like the main decks that were using 3 Tactical Talents were Orcus and Infernoble Knight. I'm not 100% sure, but I know these 2 decks literally played like the whole trinity, like 3 Called by the Grave, 3 Crossout Designator, 3 Tactical Talents, and I mean, Forbidden Drop, like I said, is going to become like a 3 of, or at least a 2 of in almost every single deck. You know, your opponent can't really respond to it, so it kind of feels like a main decky Dark Ruler No More, even though they already have access to Dark Ruler No More. It's not really good in the main deck because it just does nothing against control decks, and in a format where, you know, Zexal exists, why would you really risk it with a card that just does nothing? And that's like another issue, right? Like, hand traps are just not too great against Zexal, they're not too great against Dragoon, but they are good at stopping like annoying, very explosive combo decks, FTK decks. In the TCG, we kind of have this problem, but it's not going to be lasting for too long, because in September, I hope the ban list will address all of this, or when Yu-Gi-Oh! Comes back to normal. I mean, I don't think Konami is going to afford to host like a YCS with this really unhealthy metagame. So one really cool thing about 3 Tactical Talents is that when you get a hand trap, well, I mean, that's basically the main application of the card, or when you're going second and, you know, you're trying to navigate through a board. But let's just say you're going first, you know, on game 2 or game 3 or even game 1 sometimes, you're just getting hand trapped like a Valor, Ash, Ogre, whatever. You can either just draw 2 cards in order to keep comboing, look at your opponent's hand, make them lose another hand trap, and then you can actually assure that you can keep comboing, or actually remove their starter, so that way even if you pass, you know you're kind of safe, and you have information, so you can also use your interruptions better. So information in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's the best virtual resource in the entire game, arguably arguably better than life points, because when you have information, your interruptions have more value, your comboing can be much safer. You can tell yourself, oh, okay, he has Nibiru and I know I can't really play through it, or he has like 2 Nibiru, I can only remove 1, or I mean at this point you won't even remove a Nibiru, you're just gonna remove their consistency cards so they break. So you just summon like 4 monsters and you pass, and then next turn also once again you had information of the turn before, so you will never special summon him more like than 4 times. It's definitely something that is almost like on the level of like physical card advantage to a certain point. And also if you're trying to go second with this card and you draw multiple copies, which is like one way to break with it, one really cool thing is that since it says you can only activate this card once per turn and not you can only use if you have multiple copies, and the activation keeps getting negated, then you can just use them again. And like I already stated at the beginning of the video, this card will pretty much always bait an interruption, or if like an interruption was already like baited, then you just then you actually just destroy them completely, because you steal Dragoon, you pop multiple monsters, you deal a lot of damage, you attack, and that's basically just already game. It's that simple. Now unfortunately for the cons, because this card also does have cons, I think it's less effective in the TCG because we don't have Maxi, which means we by default have 3 less handshops than them, and then since we don't have Maxi, you almost feel demotivated to play like too many handshops, because now you're actually using like you're really negging, right? You're not drawing them, like drawing into them when your opponent is playing. You're basically using money out of your own pocket and not really making your opponent pay taxes and destroying them with their own taxes that they're paying. That's basically the best analogy for this. And I feel like outside of this particular really cancer format, it's just less dependent on handshops like overall. If like people might as well just break boards with like, I don't know, like generic good cards, right? Like Dark Ruler is just like a really good example. Kaijus are decent against Dragoon. I mean, there are even other options. Once again, I'm also going to make like a completely different video on just Dragoon specifically. So yeah, let me know if you are down for that. But also another issue with 3 tactical talents is that there are a couple of handshops it doesn't necessarily allow you to play through. So Infinite, for example, is like a really easy one because it's a trap card and not a monster effect. So even if you get a handshop, then you can't use 3 tactical talents, so it stays in your hand and doesn't do anything. Another one is Dimension Shifter, or Dimensional Shifter. Anyways, D-Shifter. This card can actually be used on draw phase or standby phase since it's proactive. That's kind of bad. So, you know, you get D-Shifter, you kind of have to pass, then you have like a dead card in your hand. If you allow them to set up, they can kind of get to a point where you will not be able to even attempt to use the 3 tactical talents. Once again, it really depends on what people decide to play, because D-Shifter is like deck dependent, not necessarily format dependent, because it's always kind of good. So, but also I'm personally not really a big fan of cards that really depend on your opponent doing something. Like they have to use they have to use a monster effect, otherwise that card is just staying in your hand and not doing anything at all. So sometimes it just feels kind of bait because you can have multiple copies of it and you're just literally praying to God that your opponent uses a monster effect. Otherwise, well, I mean, yeah, you really have less cards to play with, where, you know, if it was Called by the Grave, then it can be used on other things at least, right? Not just handshops. And if you're playing a card against handshops that only really like stops handshops and other proactive monster effects on your turn, not necessarily the best. But yeah, obviously this card would be good against decks like Guru, which can obviously use Fiendus or the effect of Guru itself during your turn, or Altergeist because they can use Hextia, Selquiltus, stuff like that. Against Eldritch, well, there's basically just no monster effects outside of Zexal and handshops. I mean, if Valor and Ash counts. Ogre, I think, is going to see less play because for sure the Numeron engine is going to die. I mean, Zexal is going to die because I don't really think they're going to host, like I said, OICS with all those cards. But yeah, personally, I think 3 tactical talents is like an okay card, but not a broken one, because it's kind of easy to play around if you're a really good player. Obviously, you can take people by surprise, and if people are very sheepy and they don't really adapt themselves to the format, like if they know that 3 tactical talents is a thing and they actually choose to keep playing like the cards that actually lose to it, or actually just keep on using that playstyle that loses to it, then it's a different story. All of a sudden, the card card goes from okay to very good. However, if people are actually smart and adjust themselves to that, in the Orchest format, when people actually started playing the Chimera decks in order to beat Cyber Dragon Infinity, Dingirsu, Galatea, well, all of a sudden, you know, once again, 3 Tactical Talents becomes really, really bad. And I might have, like, I prefer having the pessimistic mentality of I think the card will be bad because people will be good. I think that's just better to have, like, in general. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. I mean, if you have, like, a different opinion, let me know in the comment section below. And that's pretty much all I had to say. So thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe because it motivates me a lot to keep making videos like these. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace!